Yeah, I think the market as a whole for these crappy mining stocks, not just gold, not just silver, but uranium, copper, the whole spectrum of metals could easily go 10 to 1, with some going 100 to 1. And lightning can strike, and some will go 1,000 to 1. It's happened before. It happened before with, well, two examples that I know well. One was Diamond Fields, and the other one was Bre-X, which are names that most people aren't familiar with, but people in the mining business are. It's real, it happens.
Hey guys, welcome to Capital Cosm. Today I've got the legend, Doug Casey, on the show. Doug, thank you for coming on, my friend.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Danny. I'm speaking to you from Buenos Aires, Argentina, where I spend a pretty fair amount of time. And it's more of a pleasure now than it's ever been before, frankly, because this country is doing something that's totally unique in the world, unprecedented even. So I've been a fan of Argentina for many years, and finally, I don't look foolish for being a fan.
So, what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen in Argentina so far after Milei's presidency?
Well, he's firing not just thousands, but tens of thousands of government employees. He's done things like gotten rid of rent controls so that if you have an apartment here in BA, you can rent it for whatever price you arrive at with the renter, all kinds of different things. And his objective is essentially to he'd like to get rid of the whole government, which serves no useful purpose, but he's making huge strides in that direction.
Yeah, 50,000. I mean, that's a pretty hefty number. Do you know like what percentage of the total bureaucracy that was?
No, I can't give you a number offhand. There's about 45 million people here in Argentina. It's not a heavily populated country because it's the seventh largest country in the world. It's a big country. 45 million is not many as that goes. And about a third of them, well, 40% of them are in and around Buenos Aires. So once you get out of the capital city, it's wide open spaces from the glaciers down south to the tropical jungles up north from the, it's a pretty fantastic place. I like it.
Yeah, I know you're a big proponent of boots on the ground, and you're doing that right now in Argentina. What's your kind of general sentiment on the ground from people in Argentina? Are they liking what they're seeing? Are they kind of not liking it? What's the general view that you've kind of felt out?
Well, perhaps I live in a bubble because I just naturally prefer only to associate with non-socialists, okay? I mean, I like to stay away from troubled people that have bent psyches. So everybody that I know is very happy about it. Look, especially the young people in this country realized that they were basically getting ripped off by the state. And official numbers were that 50% of the Argentine population were living in poverty. And that's poverty by Latin American standards, not by North American standards. So they were ready for a change. They were just fed up with the lies and the controls and the taxes and the regulations that the Peronists or the Kirchnerites had. I mean, this country actually was, the economy here was actually formulated following the prescriptions of Mussolini, who was the person that coined the word fascism. That was a word that was created by Mussolini. And it was the melding of the state with corporations, which is what economic fascism is about. So that's what Argentina was about. And over the last 100 years, it's gone from being one of the most prosperous countries in the world, one of the 3 or 4 most prosperous, along with the US, and to bottom of the barrel. So I'm very optimistic. This is one of the best countries in the world to be in, and it's getting better. I'm very happy about the whole, and I've been to, I guess, how many of countries? I've been to 155 or 160 countries. That's a lot, and lived in 10. And by lived in, I mean been there long enough to take a lease on an apartment or buy real estate. So I think I speak with some authority on this.
Yeah. So he's been in office for about what, 5 to 6 months now. What do you say to people who say that the inflation rate is continuing to grow higher? I know on a year-on-year basis, he wasn't in office a year ago. But what about the inflation rate? How is that kind of is that something from his policies, or was that something that was kind of already baked in the cake before he even came into the office?
Well, you can't believe government numbers anywhere, but inflation was very bad here before he was in office. Uh, was reported at 200% per year, which is devastating because the average person, the average working person, if he produces more than he consumes and saves the difference, he has to save in the local currency, typically. And that was the Argentine peso. But you couldn't save in the peso because it was vanishing right before your very eyes. So it was important that he get rid of inflation. And of course, he wants to get rid of the central bank, the local equivalent of the Federal Reserve in the US. And I think he's still going to be able to do that. But the answer to the question is that inflation has come down at this point where it's probably running only 25% per year, and it's dropping. And his next step is going to be radically reduce taxes. There's all kinds of taxes on everything here in Argentina. And he's going to radically reduce regulations of all type and get rid of the stranglehold of the unions on this country, where they're a protected class. He's radically changing everything here, and it's wonderful because actually, even when things were bad in Argentina, they're actually pretty good.
I see. Well, hey, let's just zoom out a bit and let's look at the global markets now. What is your general view of the markets at the moment? Sort of like your 60,000 foot view where we're kind of at.
Well, the US market is at all-time highs. I mean, bonds, which had been, start out, you may recall that interest rates in the US were, in the early 1980s, the government was paying 15% for long-term money, almost 20% for short-term money. So interest rates have been trending down in the US for about 40 years. That's a lifetime. And now since 2022, they've been going back up. I think they're going to go much, much higher in the future. And that's going to be inconvenient for a lot of people. At the same time, the stock market has been in a bull market now for decades, and it's become very overpriced by all the conventional standards: price earnings ratio, dividend yields, price to book ratio, all kinds of things. It's actually in a bubble. So I take a very gloomy outlook for the US in the future.
So, what should be on the radar screen of the average investor at the moment? What should be popping up right now on their screen?
Well, almost everything's overpriced, and that's actually cosmically impossible. Everything can't be overpriced, which is standard for being overpriced. But I've been a gold bug for, well, for most of my life. And I've always used it as a savings vehicle, starting when it was $42.22 per ounce after Nixon put on, back in 1971 when he cut the dollar away from any relationship to gold. And it's been a great thing to save with, from $40 to say 2,400. So that's been fine. And occasionally it's been a spectacular speculation in addition to a great savings vehicle. So I guess to answer your question, if you want to preserve wealth in the future and see your wealth grow relative to other things, even though gold is at a new high, not in real terms, but in dollar terms, I'd be buying gold, and I'd look at other commodities too. So commodities are cheap, and the stock market is high, and the bond market is high. So don't own conventional stocks and bonds, own gold and commodities at this point.
Could we be entering with the markets where they are at the moment, all-time highs and everything? Could we be entering the so-called crack-up boom, where markets just go insane, but at the same time, inflation runs even hotter? You kind of saw this in Weimar Republic, right? The inflation was rising at a faster pace than the actual stock market. So, albeit the stock market rose to new all-time highs, on a real term basis, you actually lost money in the stock market. Is that also in your calculations?
Yeah, that's exactly where we're heading, actually. The US government has painted itself into a corner where they have no alternative if they want to maintain things, or maintain themselves, I should say, but to print more money. And they're going to be printing money by the trillions. The current US government deficit is almost $2 or $3 trillion per year and going up. That means that if you hold dollars, you're using dollars as a vehicle, you're in a lot of trouble. And what's going to happen to all these dollars that the US government is creating? Well, a lot of them are going to flow into the stock market. So even though the stock market is very overpriced right now, and you can build a good case for a stock market collapse, I'm not making that prediction in particular, because they're going to keep on printing up money. That's what a crack-up boom is about. And what happens when you have inflation like we have now in the US, and all the debt we have in the US? If you're borrowing money, two things are happening, or one of two things, or both things. One is that you're borrowing capital that people have put together in past generations and consuming it with your consumer debt, or you're mortgaging your future. And with debt in the US at all-time highs, credit card debt, student debt, automobile debt, mortgage debt, this is a time bomb waiting to go off.
Yeah. So you mentioned gold as kind of a place to look into. How do you determine what form of gold you invest in, whether it be the physical, whether it be the equities? The equities haven't really kept pace with the physical gold price for almost over a decade now. Would you look towards the equities as well as the physical metal? I understand, the equities are more speculative. The physical is more of an insurance play. But what do you think of the equities?
I think that they're a fantastic bargain right now. They're very, very cheap in real terms. Gold is, let's say round numbers, 2,400 an ounce. The all-in sustaining costs of companies that are mining gold, that are actually mining as opposed to exploring for it, is roughly industry-wide $1,300 per ounce, $1,350. So the mining companies are coining money at this point, but nobody wants to own them. Why not? Because mining has a very bad name among the economic cognoscenti. I mean, look, they're raping Mother Earth by digging holes in the ground. Nobody likes that idea. So, and anyway, mining, actually, I've been involved in it for many, many years, is actually a crappy business to start with, because it costs you many millions of dollars to go on an Easter egg hunt looking for a gold deposit. And then your trouble really starts. Once you find a gold deposit, it's going to cost you scores, hundreds of millions, at least, to develop it, put a lot of drill holes in the ground to find out the nature of the deposit and where you ought to build the mine. And then your trouble really starts when you build the mine, because now you've got to raise hundreds of millions of dollars to get the gold out of the ground. And even then, your troubles are just starting. They're getting worse, because now that you have a mine, it's stuck in one place, and the government's going to tax it. A lot of governments look for royalties on it. Local groups are going to want to use it as a golden goose. NGOs are going to come in and try to shake you down and make your life miserable. So yeah, gold stocks are cheap for a good reason, but it's not just gold stocks, it's mining stocks in general. What I've said about gold is also true about copper and uranium and nickel and all these things. But if you, when you flip that switch on the wall, if you want the lights to come on, if you want to have cutlery to eat with, if you want, you need metals, and metals come out of the ground. And gold is a very important metal because its main use is as money. Otherwise, what are you going to use? You're going to use funny money currency, pieces of paper, which has not been a good idea for a while, has never been a good idea. So yeah, I think that the mining stocks are once again going to have their day in the sun. And when they do, this time, as they have since in the last 50 years, there have been about 5 major bull markets in these things, where the whole group has run 10 to 1, with many stocks going 100 to 1, and some stocks going to 1,000 to 1. And I'm not talking over a lifetime. I'm talking about over the period of 4 or 5 years. So I think it'll happen again. But you're right. Right now, it's been a desert. They've gone nowhere for a long time. But actually, the bull market in gold, in mining stocks, has actually started. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But, a year ago, the Vancouver Stock Exchange Index was at 500, basically an all-time low. And now it's closing in on 600. It's up about 20%. So I think the trend has even changed with crappy mining stocks.
Yeah, I think this is the market kind of signaling that, this rally is the real deal. I mean, I'm starting to see it in my own portfolio of gold and silver mining stocks, and they're starting to outperform the actual physical metal. So I get the sense that kind of money, smart money or whatever, feeling confident enough to go down the risk curve and invest in some of these mining companies because they think that this precious metals rally is the real deal. You've got China, you've got Russia, all beginning stockpiling gold for over a decade now. All these central banks stockpiling gold, and as you've alluded to, gold is money. But what a lot of people don't also know is that silver has been money as well. More particularly in the United States, we had a silver standard up until the gold standard, which was, I think, lasted from the very beginnings of the United States all the way up until the early 20th century. So do you think that silver also has some sort of place in this future monetary system that's being carved out as well, as it's had historically?
Well, I don't know about the monetary system per se, but silver is a much more volatile commodity than gold because, well, we can look at the numbers. How much gold is in existence? It's a number most people don't think about. and nobody knows what the number is actually, but it's probably something like 7 billion ounces of gold are above ground in vaults in existence someplace. Uh, with silver, uh, there aren't huge inventories like gold because it's used as an industrial metal for electronics and so forth. Silver is the most reflective of all metals. It's the most electrically conductive of all metals. So it's got, in a high-tech world, which we live in, it's got more uses all the time. They mine about roughly 1 billion ounces of silver every year. How much gold do they mine? They mine about 90 million ounces of gold. I mean, all these numbers, if you crunch them and look at the money supply and so forth, bottom line is silver's a very volatile commodity, much more volatile than gold. And relative to gold, it's very cheap right now. I mean, historically, silver tended to be around 17 to 1 is the historical number. Now we're talking about 90 to 1 for gold. So that when the public gets the bit in its teeth, silver being the poor man's gold, yep, it's going to run because it's a very small market.
Yeah, you kind of see this play out in interestingly enough in the crypto markets. Whenever you have these big Bitcoin bull runs like in 2017 and 2021, Bitcoin runs first, and then you have all the other altcoins come after it because of the same phenomenon. When Bitcoin gets too ahead of itself and becomes too expensive, people just look down the daisy chain of risk and say, well, I can at least get that one. That's a fraction of the cost. And I think that's what will also play out, once these precious metals prices start, really kicking it into high gear. Um, you mentioned 1,000 to 1 winnings or bets in your portfolio in the past. Are you still, swinging for the fences, to that degree? Are you still looking for 1,000 baggers, 100 baggers in your current strategy, or have you kind of become a little bit more conservative?
Those are anomalies. And look, like here in Buenos Aires, I went out to dinner with a social group of Argentines, Brits, and Americans down here. Interesting group. And one guy I was chatting with, I didn't even know was in the mining business here in Argentina. Now, his stock that he's involved in is trading unbelievably for 2 Canadian cents. So I asked him a few things about it. This is interesting. He says that this company, which has a current market cap, what did he say? About $4 or $5 million, has had $200 million invested in it, exploring in Argentina. Really, this is a very cheap stock. And if they find a viable deposit, and with the new government here in Argentina, they'll be able to mine it profitably, hopefully. So, yeah, a 2 cent stock could easily go to $2, easily go to $2. And even then, the thing would have not even a micro cap market cap. It would still be a nano cap. In fact, it'd be a pico cap. Now, these things are very, very volatile. These opportunities are out there, but they're risky. I mean, this company always has to raise money. They don't have any income, but yeah, things can change. So the answer to your question, yeah, I think the market as a whole for these crappy mining stocks, not just gold, not just silver, but uranium, copper, the whole spectrum of metals could easily go 10 to 1, with some going 100 to 1. And lightning can strike, and some will go 1,000 to 1. It's happened before. It happened before with, two examples that I know well. One was Diamond Fields, and the other one was Bre-X, which are names that most people aren't familiar with, but people in the mining business are. It's real, it happens.
Yeah, yeah. So you've got to be a true contrarian to play those. But I know you are a contrarian, Doug. So I've got to ask you this: any true blue contrarian plays that you're looking at right now that no one else is talking about? I'm not talking about commodities or anything like that, but just something out of left field that you see as a contrarian that you think might have legs.
Well, look, there's like one company. This is not a mining company that has developed an earbud that you can manipulate, whether it's a computer screen or a wheelchair or a jet airplane, with an earbud in your ear, not using your fingers in a computer. It's got huge applications, and it's a startup. It's a new thing. So I'm doing that. Uh, Maybe it'll go bust. They say high tech, big wreck. Well, it's true. But then again, as we all know, high tech, if it catches on, I mean, other huge, I tend to buy things like that, frankly, instead of buying like General Motors. Why would anybody buy General Motors or for that matter, Ford or things like that? They're big, dumb companies and you know, chances are better you're going to lose money than make money. You got a huge amount of risk. It just doesn't seem like it because they're big, well-known names. So I tend to go for small, volatile companies that have the potential, whether they realize it or not, it's obviously a different question, of hitting a long ball home run.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So let's go ahead and shift gears now. There's this talk of this bird flu pandemic that might be coming over the horizon. The FDA, the CDC have all kind of given out warnings about another pandemic this year. How does someone prepare for these kind of black swans coming down the pike? Like what should the average investor be thinking of right now?
Well, first thing is don't believe everything you hear, and especially if it comes from the government or people around the government. I mean, the chances are it's what's commonly known as bullshit. Like the whole COVID hysteria was actually a hysteria. And the vaccines that came after it were even more of a hysteria. I, I'm just flummoxed by the naivety and the credibility of the average person.
Well, they've had
But
to recall the AstraZeneca vaccine a day ago.
look, this could be one of the biggest scandals in world history, this whole vaccine thing. The whole COVID thing, quite frankly, it's a relatively trivial form of flu, different, but not really deadly. And they tried to turn it into something most people thought it's the new black plague, and then come up with a ridiculous solution, which was much more dangerous than the disease itself. So I guess bird flu is the next thing that is being used to create hysteria. And uh,
And they only come around every 4 years. It's really interesting.
yeah, it really is. Well, they've got that. And then, of course, they've got global warming, climate change, which is another complete scam, more total hysteria. It's These things are very helpful, however, for controlling people. I mean, some people like to control other people, and these people always wheedle their ways into government where they can enforce their will upon other people. And then using things like uh, COVID or bird flu, which is the next thing on the runway, or global warming, or one thing after another. Uh, it's very helpful for them to cement themselves into power.
Yeah, and it's really a function of the power of the government. If the government did not have all of this power and influence, then there wouldn't be this kind of attraction towards these positions of power from these people.
Well, you're right. And most people think that government is we the people. It's not. I mean, it's all a sham. It's not a democracy. Uh, Not that that's even necessarily a good thing. Uh, Listen, government is not your friend. It's actually your enemy. It's a predator that's out there stalking you with its taxes that, in the case of the average American, takes 30, even 40% of his income. Well, that's out of his income. Then you've got to pay real estate taxes and sales taxes and import duties and 100 other things like that, and regulations. What do they do with that money? Well, in addition to paying people not to work and so forth, they uh, pass regulations that bedevil you, tell you what you can do and must not do. So I'm not a fan of government in principle, and getting different guys into government does not solve the problem. The institution itself is outmoded. Actually, it's largely unnecessary.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you classify yourself as an anarcho-capitalist, correct?
That's quite correct. I believe that everything that needs doing, everything that's needed and wanted by people in general will be provided by entrepreneurs who are looking to profit from meeting the needs of the public. So no, you really don't need government, frankly.
Yeah.
And now less than ever, frankly, is
And,
government.
yeah, and I think we're heading towards this fragmentation I think we're going to have more deglobalization than globalization we've had over the last 80 or so years now. Um, so with potential financial collapse, monetary collapse, system-wide collapse, that's all avant-garde nowadays to talk about. But how does someone kind of prepare themselves for these once in a lifetime, maybe once in a couple lifetime changes, these fourth turning events that we seem to be right on the precipice of? I know you mentioned precious metals from a monetary side, but you're going to Argentina, you live in Uruguay, you've taken the leap to leave the United States. I don't know if you still live in the United States. I think you still visit in the summer, right?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. But so, like, what are some ways to kind of get ahead of the collapsing empire?
Well, in the first place, if you possibly can, don't be an employee of a corporation or somebody else. Try to be an entrepreneur, providing goods and services to the market on your own, as opposed to having a job that somebody else gives you. So try to be independent that way. Uh, Try to produce more than you consume, which means get out of debt and have net savings, which will make you more independent. I mean, if you have debt, it's an albatross around your neck, like all these fools that took on college debt. I mean, they got nothing but indoctrination for their college degree, which is in most cases worth nothing, but they have to pay off a lot of debt for an indeterminate time in the future. So, I mean, I've been saying, I was on the Donahue show the day before the national elections in 1980, a long time ago. And one of the things that I said that the audience didn't like was, don't go to college. It's a misallocation of your time and money. Well, that was true then, but now I'd say it's much more, it's actively detrimental, not just a misallocation of these things. So that's another piece of advice. And the third piece is, your biggest risks in the world are, you've got huge financial and economic risks today in the world for a lot of reasons that we could talk about. But as big as your financial and economic risks are in the world, political risks are even bigger. So you got to diversify politically. And that means you should have some assets outside of your home country, the US for most people, and preferably have a second residence in another place so that if bad things happen in the US, and I think the US is headed towards something that's going to resemble a civil war, uh, you can insulate yourself from that.
Probably living in a less population dense environment, I would presume, right? Because you want to minimize your interaction with people when times get kind of crazy like that.
Yeah, being in a big city in chaotic times is a bad idea. Yeah,
Yeah, the more
exactly.
people you have around you, the higher the probability you have a bad interaction. So, I mean, that's the way I view it.
Yep, I think you're absolutely correct about that.
Yeah. So, we've talked about your investment gains in the past. There's 1,000. What has been kind of like what have been some blunders that you've had in your investing career? Like, what did you learn from it?
Uh, Plenty of mistakes, I can promise you that. Um, just try not to have any of the mistakes be fatal or d too debilitating. So, and it takes a lot of time to learn that firsthand. Uh, you can read lots of books. I mean, just reading Warren Buffett's annual reports from Berkshire Hathaway alone are is much, much more beneficial than getting an economics degree in a college. Most of that economics degree is Keynesian. It'll be total bullshit, be useless, worse than useless. Uh, so, God, what mistakes have I made? There have been plenty, and I'm sure I'm going to make plenty more. But you just try to come out net balance on top, and the way you do that is by knowing as much as you can. The broader base of knowledge that you have, the less the chances you're going to make a bad mistake, and the greater the chances you're going to find a really good deal.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I mean, you mentioned just really trying to learn and understand economics. I mean, honestly, I mean, I don't mean to toot my own horn, but like, I don't feel like economics is really that complicated. Like, you can leapfrog a lot of mistakes just by asking yourself, like from an economics point of view, who does this benefit? What is the incentive behind it? Uh, and then, I mean, you're going to get 60% of the first and second order effects. When you read like books like Economics in One Lesson or any like the Ayn Rand books and so forth, I mean, these are all very common sense principles that you learn. And all you've got to do is just sit down and just ask yourself, what's the incentive? And what's the first and second order effects, third order effects that come down the line from this? And you're going to come across a lot more in the right, I would say, than a lot of these Ivy League economists that just kind of lack common sense. They kind of get lost in the weeds. I think Nassim Taleb calls them IYIs, intellectuals yet idiots. So they intellectualize, they overcomplicate something that doesn't really need all these mathematical models and so forth.
Yep, you're exactly right. I mean, the economics that is taught in the schools is detrimental, has no relation to reality. I mean, you're absolutely correct. In fact, most of the things that are, unless you're taking a STEM course, science, technology, engineering, math in college, you're probably being actively miseducated. Most of these soft courses are things that you should learn yourself by reading. And it's easier today than ever. With the internet, you've got access to all the world's knowledge at your fingertips. And it's easy to ingest with YouTube and podcasts. So there's plenty of knowledge if you want to go and get it.
Yeah, I mean, take like the minimum wage thing, for example. That's like a classic, talking point. They just raise the minimum wage up to $20 in California. You just got to sit down and ask yourself, okay, if you raise the minimum wage $20, what does that incentivize employees to do? To automate and to remove lesser valuable employees that aren't worth $20 an hour's worth of work. And that's what's been happening since. I mean, you've just got to take a step back and do these thought experiments with yourself. Like I don't get the sense that like this, a lot of economics is a lot more, they make it out to be a lot more complex and complicated than it really needs to be. Like people
Oh,
don't ever take the time to pause and like think this through.
oh, you're absolutely right. And if regulating the price of labor and the minimum wage was a good idea, well, why stop at 20? Why not raise the minimum wage to $50 an hour? Better $100 an hour. Then we will all be wealthy. But if you look at it that way, you can see how ridiculous it is. In addition to the moral aspect of it, there's that who's got a right to tell you what you can and cannot earn or pay, or so it's ethically wrong in addition to being economically stupid. All this government intervention.
Yeah. Well, hey, Doug, thank you so much for coming on, my friend. Any social media or websites you want to plug before we sign off, and any concluding thoughts?
Well, several things that I'd mentioned, Danny. I have a daily blog called internationalman.com with a lot of good writing from me and others. It's free, so get that. I have a podcast named Doug Casey's Take on YouTube. So that's a couple times a week. And I'd also recommend, I've written a number of books, but the current ones are my novels, which I think are quite well done. Speculator, Drug Lord, and Assassin. They're the first three of a group of 7 that are reforming unjustly besmirched occupations, showing that you can be a good guy as a speculator or a drug lord or, frankly, an assassin. So they're radical and interesting and well written. So go on Amazon and get those.
Okay.
Also,
Yeah. We'll have the links posted to those down below. And we'll have the links to the website posted down below as well. Any concluding thoughts or?
no, it's been fun talking to you, Danny. We can do this again and see what the world is like as we move towards Guy Fawkes Day, which incidentally is the same day that the national elections are going to be held in November.
Interesting. Well, if you guys enjoyed this content, be sure to give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, comment down below, let me know what you think. Do you agree or disagree with any of Doug's points? And also, if you want to support the channel, you can buy me a coffee. Link to that is down below. Money's tight. A simple like, comment, subscribe also helps. Click on any of the affiliate links down below. We do get a cut. It does help the channel, and you get an awesome product in return. And with that said, you guys, I will see you in the next episode. Bye, y'all.